Welcome to the Emerge Collaborative podcast. I'm Falon.
And I'm Rachel.
Together, we share more than 2 decades of experience working with young adults on college campuses.
So on this podcast, we're engaging the questions we hear in our ministry to better equip those who care for the emerging adults in their lives.
We are here with Becca Johnson. Becca Johnson has studied ministry and has worked with emerging adults on university campuses for 10 years, guiding them spiritually and helping them discern where God is leading them. Thank you so much for being here, Becca. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Becca, we would love it if you could start out by just telling us a little bit about your experience being mad at the church.
Yeah. Well, I want to start out by saying that I've witnessed people I love being hurt by the church for a long time, sadly, even generations of people in my family in different ways. But it wasn't until about the last couple of years that I personally was hurting. Well, and here's the other thing I want to caveat real quick is that I'm defining the church as not just my church that I'm a member of, but anyone who is part of the body of Christ. And so for me, that translated into my friend group, my community, the place where I live, where I work. I mean, just everything. It really infiltrated my whole life. And I feel like that's important to note because I feel like that's true for a lot of people. And sometimes we don't think of it in those terms, but it can really be that holistic. And so, yeah, I had some hard things come up this year. And I remember one Sunday walking into church and sitting in the back pew because I didn't want to be seen. I didn't trust my emotions after some of the things that happened. And to be honest, there are days when I still don't know if I will spontaneously combust into tears. And so, yeah, I remember sitting in that back pew and kind of watching the people in front of me and half listening to the sermon, but mostly ruminating and thinking to myself, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I fit in here. I think for the first time personally, I felt not completely loved by the people around me. And well, I should say there are 2 camps. There are the people that I felt like didn't want me anymore because I didn't align with maybe what they were believing about a situation. And then there was the other camp of people that just didn't know what I was going through or what was going on in my life at all. And of course, I can't hold that against people for not knowing what's going on. But nevertheless, it felt isolating and I felt unsafe. And to be honest, I'm still very much working through some of the grief that I've experienced and some of the loss that I've experienced in the last year. But I do struggle with still feeling unsafe. And that's gut-wrenching.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I feel like what I heard you say is, there's this all-encompassing experience where you're not just angry or upset or hurt from your one specific church, but that it bleeds into your experience and understanding of maybe what I would say like the universal church, like the capital C church. And also that it's on top of it, very isolating and in your own personal experience can bleed into so many other areas. Like you said, work, friends, community, worship, all of it.
All of it. It's hard. And yeah, it's just like we as millennials love to talk about breaking generational curses. And if you're talking about church trauma, that is a generational curse. Like that is deep, deep, deep in the veins of the body of Christ. I don't know, that's a growing up moment for me that I learned this year. It's just like, and I remember sitting in that back corner of the church thinking to myself, I'm vowing to myself right now to never pass judgment on someone who cannot bring themselves to come to church, because I get it now. Yeah. I get how hard it can be and how even like, it's not even necessarily that I was mad at people. I mean, I'm sure there are certain like specific people, but it wasn't as much that I was angry. It was more that like I didn't know how to handle people, and I didn't trust myself, my emotions around people. And yeah, it really opened my eyes and gave me a lot of empathy for people who have gone through hard situations and just can't bring themselves to face the overwhelm of it all.
Yeah. We know that there are just so many people who've experienced pain in church, and that's understandable. Like, anytime you get more than 2 people in a room, like, we're all broken. Communities are broken. Yeah. The church certainly isn't exempt from the ways in which humans hurt each other in relationship and in community. And it can feel really scary, like you said, like that first time you realize, like, I don't know if I belong here, especially for people who are really familiar with church or grew up in church and like this has been a home for them, and then to suddenly not feel that way or to be harmed by a community that you thought was one way and it turned out to be another way, whatever it might be. And it can feel really taboo to talk about it. Like, some people end up just kind of fading away because they don't know how to talk about it with anyone in their community, what they're experiencing, or if they do, it's not handled very well. And then other people like grin and bear it and just like suffer in the back pew for a really long time because they don't know what else to do, and they feel like God will be mad at them if they express anger, if they acknowledge the anger or pain or grief that they're feeling. I know that, like, in your work on a college campus with emerging adults, you've interacted with lots of people, not just young adults, but also people of all ages and stages of faith and life that have experienced pain at church. So what are some of the reasons that people are angry or feel pain toward church?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are so many things that it could be. And I'm glad that you brought up that we're all broken people, because not like in an overly Calvinistic, like we're all totally depraved, but like we all do fall short, you know?
Yeah.
And so broken people create broken systems. And so there's so many things like hypocrisy, poor leadership, or just feeling neglected, or like there's no place for your perspective to be heard, just feeling outcasted in some way. And to me, all of these things are just the opposite of the character of God. So it's like the Bible says we'll know people by their fruit. To me, this is like the reasons people leave church are because they're seeing the opposite of fruit. Whatever that would be, like a vegetable, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
Rotten fruit, maybe.
Rotten
This is
fruit.
the broccoli. I was looking for a pomegranate.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, neglect, that's the opposite of compassion. A poor leadership, that's the opposite of righteousness. And so they're seeing the opposite of God's face. And I think there's some cognitive dissonance there. Like, it's like you're staring at the name tag of someone across from you and it says, "Hi, my name is Image Bearer." But I don't understand. This is not making sense to me, because what I'm seeing is not God's face or God's character. It's not love. And so I think the real reason people struggle with the church and wanting to leave the church is they're experiencing the opposite of love.
What I hear there is people are often mad at church because they love God and trust God.
Yeah.
And the church isn't reflecting that.
Yeah.
And it's not always the same thing to be mad at God when one is mad at church.
Right. Right. I think for people that struggle with anger and there's no place for them to express it in church in that moment, it can be very hard to discern that you're not really mad at God. You're mad at the fact that people are misrepresenting God's character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially when I think about how many different reasons, like you said, there could be for experiencing hurt and pain in church, that really, if we kind of take the 30,000-foot view, it's any experience you have that is outside of the way that we understand the character of God. So yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering, as we're talking about church hurt, if we could parse out a little bit the difference between church hurt and religious trauma. If we could maybe define terms a little bit and talk about if you think there are some distinctions there.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's a great question. And for me, it's like the difference between a broken leg and having, cancer or some sort of chronic illness. Let's say 2 broken legs. Like
Up the analogy,
yeah. Let's make this real interesting. So like 2 broken legs, that's nothing to scoff at. That's debilitating, but it does heal. And I think that religious trauma is it's cancer. It changes the way you function. It changes the way you see the world, and it affects your nervous system in a way that's almost like you're processing it like danger. And so I think that religious trauma is much. It goes much deeper, and is much more long lasting. Yeah, I mean, I don't think one is necessarily worse than the other. They're just 2 very different things, but it takes a lot more to try to heal religious trauma because it's so much bigger than just one person's hurt.
I love that analogy because even though you can heal from cancer, always you are a cancer survivor.
Yes.
And that identity never goes away. And that the lingering effects of it, the fear of it coming back again, remain. And in the people I've worked with, especially the young adults I've worked with who've experienced religious trauma, even as they seek healing, there's always the worry of it coming back, having to monitor it, and just kind of that identification with the illness, so to speak, the pain of it, even as healing comes. And that is different than a broken leg, even 2 broken legs.
Yeah. You don't hear anyone say, I'm a broken leg survivor. And
that's so true.
So that's a really, really good analogy.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
We hear from emerging adults a fear, especially as they're kind of coming out of the whatever ecosystem of religion, faith, spirituality from their parents' household. We often hear fear about expressing some pain toward that church because it's oftentimes like a really complicated pain where like that church has nurtured them and cared for them and loved them and there's lots of really good people and they are starting to question some really significant brokenness that they're seeing as they emerge into adulthood and can see with clearer eyes.
Yeah.
And oftentimes as they finally confess it to themselves, to a minister, a mentor, and to God, there's often a deep fear of how God will respond to them. If God will think less of them for not having, quote unquote, less faith or giving up, quote unquote, on the church or something like that. How do you think God responds to us when we are experiencing grief and anger toward the church?
I love that question. And it reminds me, I was talking to my therapist, aka ChatGPT, the other day. And
for our listeners, do not use ChatGPT as a therapist. This is our disclaimer.
Yes.
Do not take this as medical advice.
No, but I do like to use it for like, I feel like shadow work can be a triggering phrase, but like very intentional journaling. And to the prompt the other day was something like knowing all of your sin cycles and your grief and your, just everything about you. If Jesus was standing right in front of you right now, how would you describe the look on his face, the expression on his face? And this question made me think of that. And I think for whatever reason, we grow up in the church and we believe that if we bring our anger to God, it's somehow not virtuous. Like it is a disturbance of peace if we're angry. And so therefore it's like, it's not showing up as a virtue. I don't believe that. I don't believe that God feels that way when we bring our raw and honest emotions to him. I think he wants us to be honest and to live fully. And I think that, downplaying our emotions, even our negative, and I put that in quotes, emotions, I think he wants us to bring those to him. And so I just imagine bringing my anger and my pain and my grief to Jesus, and just seeing like pain in his eyes, but a God that wants to run toward the pain. Yeah, I think of like John 11 and Martha being like, if you had been here, Lord, like if you had just been here, things would have been different. And I think of how Jesus reacted to that, and it wasn't like, well, if you had, or like, what he did was he comforted her and he sat with her in her grief, and I like to imagine that he held her and was like scratching her back as she cried and was inconsolable. And I think for us, he does that when we bring him our grief and our anger. And I think he scratches our back while we cry, and he says, I will raise the church that you love up again, and I will raise the person that you saw mistreated up again, and I will raise you up again. Because I'm a God that does that. Yeah. And I think he sits with us always, and I think he has compassion always.
That's a beautiful picture. I love taking stories in scripture and kind of trying to fill them out, in my mind. And I love that picture of Jesus consoling her and Jesus consoling you and us in pain, and the desire that God has to, I think the phrase you used was to like run toward or like step toward the pain instead of pulling back. Or stepping away from it. Yeah. And I think sometimes, kind of going back to what you said earlier, as human beings, while we are image bearers, we are broken, we have a tendency to step back from other people's pain. Oh yeah. And the term that tends to be used for that discomfort with leaning in is spiritual bypassing. And I'm wondering, like, for our listeners who may not be familiar with that term or this concept, like, can you help us kind of define that? I feel like I'm like the term definer today. I'm like, can you define that term for us again?
It's helpful about language to things.
It is, yeah. Can you define spiritual bypassing for us and talk a little bit about how it potentially delays healing?
Yeah, for sure. I like that you're talking about like running toward pain versus retreating away from it, because I do think that spiritual bypassing at its very core is an avoidant attachment style. But instead of, like, if we're talking about attachment theory, instead of one person's relationship with another person, this is like a person's relationship with the church or a person's relationship with spirituality. And I think that spiritual bypassing is just a way to avoid the complications and the complexity of sitting with someone in their grief. Well, since we're giving so many medical analogies today.
This is our medical podcast, actually.
I didn't know I was so into medical analogies. But it's kind of like, you're slapping a Band-Aid on someone with chronic illness and calling it good. And you're like, but see, I helped you. There's the evidence right there. Like, it's on your shoulder. I tried to help. And, it's not actually helpful. And we all know that. But it's just a way to kind of navigate around the hard things in church. And I feel like that often comes up as like, I don't know, placating or, using, I don't know, very Christian-like turns of phrase that it'll all get better in time, or like, it's something that's just, I don't know, maybe sounds super deep, but it actually has no substance behind it. And it doesn't make someone who is deeply feeling really big emotions, it doesn't help them in any way toward healing. It just kind of maybe looks like it's helping.
Yeah.
And maybe helps the person saying it to feel like they've done something.
I did something.
Yeah.
I did what I could, And I think that's much easier because it's much simpler than just sitting with someone in their pain and feeling that discomfort and empathizing with their discomfort, or just like seeking to understand, So yeah, unfortunately, I feel like this is something that I see a lot in the church and just in individuals.
It reminds me, like, going back to that story of Lazarus dying and Mary and Martha saying, like, if you had been here, Lord. And Jesus doesn't get defensive. Jesus doesn't say like, I'm going to raise him. Like, calm down, you know? Jesus knows that Lazarus is about to walk out of the tomb alive. And Jesus still sits right next to them and weeps with them. Doesn't just accept their tears, but joins in the grief, knowing that the pain of death is still immensely painful, even with the hope and the reality of the resurrection and recreation. And so I love that story about Jesus, and I appreciate you bringing it. It's a powerful story of what it looks like to accept pain and grief, even when there is hope and healing on the other side.
Yeah. I love that he doesn't jump to, an action item. Like, it's not like he's like jumping straight to healing. He doesn't like gently touch her face and be like, everything happens for a reason. You know? He doesn't do that. He instead like holds her and, like you said, weeps with her. And I don't know why, as a people, as a church, we have like left no room for just crying with each other. It's all over the Bible. Like, literally all of wisdom literature is pure lament, and I just, I don't know.
That's so good, because like I wrestle with that a lot. The Psalms, 2/3 of them are lament Psalms, and Jeremiah is full of lament. Lamentations, is Jeremiah's other book where it's literally in the name, Lamentations. And, in the Bible, there are people challenging God, asking really hard questions at God. We have people cursing at God in the Bible, cursing at each other, praying these really, in some cases, at first glance, awful, kind of disgusting prayers where you're just like, oh my gosh, that is not appropriate. We would never say that at church. We would never say that in our prayer circles or our life groups. And yet it is preserved as sacred scripture, not because those ideas are the complete narrative, but because if our theologies don't have the capacity for lament, anger, grief, for the way things shouldn't be, then we're not fully worshiping the God who is making all things right and the way things should be. So I guess I there's just such a profound disconnect between our holy scriptures that we call sacred and the whole range of human emotions, including what we often designate as bad emotions: confusion, anger, grief, pain, lament, rage. The list goes on. And our lack of acceptance of those really raw emotions in our churches. So why is it that uncomfortable emotions, anger and grief being two of many, are often so unwelcome in church when we see them show up in the Bible so much?
Yeah. Like, why is lament canonized at all, much less like most of the Old Testament, if it's not important? I think that's such a good question. But I mean, I think that as a church, we tend to just shy away from things we can't fully explain, because no one wants to be the person that's wrong about something. Like, no one wants to say confidently, this is what this means, and then be wrong. Like, it's too high stakes. And so I think for things, especially, these, like you're saying, quote unquote, negative emotions, like, no one really wants to touch them because we don't exactly know what to do with them. And it's a shame, because I do think that's what leads people to feel so isolated, is that they just feel like they can't fully express themselves. I don't know. I just think that God wants us to love with our heart, mind, and soul. And like, that includes the messy parts. I think he came to give life abundantly. And I don't think it's living abundantly or loving abundantly to not be honest with your emotions. And it's a funny thing, too, when you feel safe to bring them to God in prayer, but you don't feel safe to bring them up to other people in church. That's a very weird disconnect. But like you were kind of saying about these like crazy prayers in the Bible, I've never felt more seen than I did when I was rereading the Psalms last year. And David would, pray. And like sometimes I would be like, oh, I'm so mad at you, God. And then But actually, I'm so grateful and like you're the best. But actually, I'm mad too. I'm still mad, And it was like these like whiplash prayers, and I was like, no, I feel that like that.
Yeah.
That resonates deeply in me right now, and so there's space. Like the Bible holds space for the range of emotions we feel as human beings, but that is not showing up yet in our churches, and I just think it's just because we just don't know how to hold it.
I read a book last year called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and it literally took me almost about a year to read this book because I would just, finish a paragraph and be like, I have to sit with it. Like, it took me so long to get through this book. It's not an explicitly Christian book, but it is deeply spiritual. But one of the things that it opened my eyes to was how sorrow, grief, and lament are a dimension of love that when we neglect them or shut them down, we're actually missing some of the depths of love.
Yeah.
And that has just really stuck with me and kind of shaped how I view my relationships, the world, and the church and my faith.
Yeah.
What does it look like to love God and to love God's people in the midst of feeling deep lament for the brokenness that we see in the church?
Yeah. Oh, I think it just looks like sitting with people through it. And that's like something that drives type A people absolutely crazy when I say, because they're like, sit with it. I don't understand that. What? Like, what does that mean? That's nothing. You're doing nothing. And
I relate.
Yes, the nothing is very productive though.
Right. But like, it is nothing and it's everything.
Yeah.
It's compassion at the heart of it. It's just learning to be there with someone, crying when they cry, like holding them when they need to be held, just being there and holding space, saying like, it's okay for you to feel these emotions. Yeah. They don't scare God, and so they don't scare me. Like you can, like, I will still be here for you. I will love you through this. All too often we want to solve the problem right away. I think that's human nature, but sometimes the best thing we can do is not try to solve it and just kind of validate the emotion, the big emotions that someone is feeling. Just making them feel seen and like reassuring that they're not alone, that, there are people here that love them and will stick with them. I know it seems so like general and simple, but it is kind of simple. It's just like, are we doing the love? Like, are we motivated by love or not?
Yeah.
And that's a problem I have with like just, trying to eradicate anger in general as, not being virtuous. It's like, there is a such thing as righteous anger. Mm-hmm. If there wasn't, Jesus wouldn't have flipped tables. He wouldn't have done, like, he got riled up about stuff. And he did it because he was wanting the loving thing to prevail. And I think if we're wanting the loving thing and we're angry that it's not happening, I think the anger is correct. Like, I think it should be validated.
Yeah. When you were talking, Becca, it reminded me of so many times when I've sat with college students who are angry with the church or have church hurt. And sometimes they come in, to someone's office, like a professor or a chaplain or a pastor, and they want like an answer. Because like you said, it feels better. Right? Yeah. And even when you kind of finally acquiesce and say, well, here are some scriptures you can read, or they usually come back and say, yeah, you were right. They didn't help. and you're like, yeah, I know. But like, I'm still here with you. And they always say, well, that's the thing that actually helps is just knowing that somebody's walking with me through it. Yeah. Because I feel like even if we had the perfect right answer to give, it wouldn't help. In the moment, it would still feel like bypassing. Yeah. So yeah, I love that. And I feel like you've given such good wisdom for the church to take in and care for those who are in pain. What wisdom or encouragement do you have for people who are angry at church, or for people who are deeply grieving over some of that church hurt? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say Well, first of all, I would say get into the Psalms because that helped me a whole lot this last year. Not just like, I don't know, not just in the sense that it's just helpful to read them, but also because it made me feel seen and like I felt like David was my friend. Like I was like, I'm not alone in this. Like this is, I get this and he gets me. I get David and he gets me. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because it's such a complicated thing. But find people that you feel safe with in the church, and don't try to stuff down those feelings or avoid them, because avoidance at the end of the day it's a trauma response. Like it is, it's a coping mechanism, and we all have to find ways to cope sometimes, and they're not like perfect. None of them are perfect. So I get that. But avoiding it's not the way. It's not loving to yourself, and it's not really honoring to God either. So feel it and find people that will sit with you in it. And there are people. And also, like, characters of the Bible are also your friends. Like, they will identify with you and you will identify with them. And so that's helped me a lot too. But yeah, there's a real complexity there. But just giving yourself time and space to feel those things and not jump to trying to solve the issue, but just like letting yourself be in that moment. And that's part of grief. Grief takes a really long time. It's its own kind of like wound healing. It takes a long time, and it's not a linear process. And so what you're feeling in that moment, like, let it through. Don't try to avoid it. And also don't completely detach or disconnect yourself from people, because there will be people like you two who show compassion, who are able to sit with and hold space for your grief and your sadness and your longing.
We talk a lot on this podcast about young adults, and of course, church hurt is not exclusive to young adults, but we do know, I think, that young adults have what I would say is a prophetic voice that sometimes shows up in church hurt, right? Where in the phase of emerging adulthood, you are wrestling with your faith in a lot of ways and discovering pieces of the church that don't seem to line up with God's character. I think young adults have a real strong voice there. So I'm wondering, as we think about the people that respond and have the potential to support a young adult, I'm thinking about a parent or a pastor maybe, when that young adult comes to them and expresses pain in relation to the church. What advice would you have for them, for the parents, for the pastors, as they're trying to come alongside the young adults in their lives?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I think that praxis is a really good thing in the church. It's really biblical, and counting the cost is really biblical. And so I think if you're going to guide a young adult kind of through this process, that it's important to always take a step back and ask yourself, is this anger, what is this anger rooted in? Is it in love for others, love for God, love for myself, or is it, rooted in fear or some other something? And if it is rooted in love, I think I would guide them to not shy away from it and not let anyone tell them that it's not good or it's not biblical. And so I think that I would guide them toward that and help them, work through that. But then also I think being a safe space for someone and just kindness and gentleness and calmness goes a long way in a person's life. And sometimes a person just needs someone to be kind to them, to be that bridge toward the path to healing. And so we've talked a lot in this podcast today about sitting with people that's something like a whole other topic we could go into, is like, how do you actually sit with people? But
yeah, that's actually more nuanced and complicated
right.
than it sounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like validating what they're feeling, sitting with them through it, and and also like not being afraid to question or to be angry or to lament. Those are all like you were saying, Falon, like different dimensions of love. And I think that's, especially for emerging adults, that's something that isn't taught to us, and also something that like we can't fully grasp yet, because it's we've been taught and formed to believe something different about anger. And so I think just validating, having compassion. And it's like, I think reading the Bible through the lens of not like, what can this do for me, but like, what is this telling me about God's character? And then what piece of the puzzle is this showing me about the face of God? And then like learning to love and kind of work with that motivation. Take some of the like right and wrong, like, am I, like, is God mad at me? Those kind of questions, it kind of like diffuses some of those bigger questions, because at the end of the day, like, we're trying to emulate what God is like, and God is love. So it's actually not that hard. it's like, is this loving or isn't this? Sounds like an overgeneralization, but it's pretty black or white. It's like, am I motivated by love or not? And so, I just reiterating that I feel like anger can be a very loving thing. And like teaching that to the emerging adults and like the next generation of people, I think could be a game changer for like part of the process. Of course, it's going to take a long time, but like part of the process of healing religious trauma.
Becca, your vulnerability today and your willingness to share your own story and your experiences with other people in your life, students you've ministered to and others who have experienced church hurt, and to share that in order to help our listeners grow, both people who are feeling church hurt maybe, and people who have people in their lives who are experiencing that and trying to better understand it. It just has been invaluable, and we appreciate it so much. Your wisdom, your gentleness, your honesty, your courage, as you have wrestled with loving God well and following in the steps of Jesus in fullness, and not just the unidimensional, easy, comfortable parts of it, but the fullness of God's love as revealed through the person of Jesus. Yeah. And you are a faithful disciple and a lover of God, and I admire you as someone who strives to faithfully love God and people, even in the midst of pain and the complexity of the human experience. And I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom so honestly and vulnerably with us today.
Thank you for saying that. That's so nice. Yeah. It's so kind.
Well, it's true. So, thank you, Becca. We really loved having you on.
Yeah. Well, I can say the same about y'all. So thank you. And thank you for having me. It's really special, and it's an honor and a privilege. So thank you.